Your employee value proposition is showing up in your hiring results. Every company has an employee value proposition. Whether it's ever been discussed in a leadership team meeting or written down on a career page is irrelevant. An EVP exists the moment employees start forming opinions about what it's actually like to work for you, and the moment candidates start asking around before deciding whether to apply. In 2026, that informal reputation matters more than anything you say about yourself. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, and wherever you happen to be right now. I'm Mike Voories, here to help you build a stronger team. EVP isn't a statement, it's an experience. Employee value proposition is often framed as an HR concept, compensation philosophy, benefits, culture statements, mission language. That framing is part of the problem. It turns something deeply human into something abstract and corporate. In reality, EVP is much simpler. It's the answer to one question every candidate asks, consciously or not. Why should I work here instead of somewhere else? Not the version of that answer you put in a job ad, the version they believe after talking to people who know your organization from the inside. That answer is shaped by leadership behavior, day-to-day expectations, communication style, and how people are treated when things don't go perfectly. It's built quietly over time, and once it exists, you don't get to control it with marketing. So why EVP has become a deal breaker in 2026? Hiring isn't more difficult because people are lazy or unmotivated. It's more difficult because candidates are better informed and more selective. They have access to former employees, industry peers, online reviews, group chats, and even recruiters who see the same patterns repeated across dozens of companies. They don't need to guess what it's like working for you or what it might feel like. They can usually find out. As a result, candidates are no longer choosing companies the way they used to. They're choosing leaders, teams, and environments. Logos matter less. Culture statements matter less. Even compensation, while still important, is rarely the deciding factor on its own. When an EVP is unclear or misaligned, it shows up in very predictable ways. Candidates hesitate late in the process. Offers get declined without a clear explanation. New hires leave within the first few months saying things like, "This isn't what I expected." That disconnect is rarely about pay, it's about experience. The most common EVP misunderstanding. Many organizations believe they are working on EVP when they're really just upgrading perks. They add benefits, they modernize office spaces, they introduce flexible schedules or wellness initiatives. Those things can be valuable, but they don't fix a broken experience, and they don't compensate for weak leadership or unclear expectations. Candidates today assume a baseline level of pay and benefits. What they are trying to evaluate is everything around those basics. How the work actually gets done, how decisions are made, how people are treated when the pressure shows up. A company can offer competitive compensation and still struggle to hire if the internal experience doesn't match the external promise. At that point, no amount of branding can save the process. You cannot out-market a bad EVP. So what actually shapes an EVP? Across industries, and especially in people-driven operational environments like landscaping and the green industry, EVP is built on a small number of fundamentals. These are not abstract concepts, they're the daily leadership behaviors. Leadership and communication sit at the top of the list. People don't expect perfection, but they do expect clarity, consistency, and follow-through. When leaders communicate openly, set expectations, and address issues directly, trust grows. When they avoid hard conversations or change direction without explanation, frustration grows just as quickly. Clarity matters just as much as leadership. Employees want to understand what success looks like, how performance is measured, and where they have autonomy. When expectations are vague or constantly shifting, even strong performers lose confidence in their role. Trust and respect are also central to EVP, though they're often talked about vaguely. In practice, they show up in very concrete ways. Whether people are trusted to do their job without micromanagement, whether time and effort are respected, and whether accountability is applied fairly. Environments that lack trust eventually lose their best people, not because of one major issue, but because of daily friction. Growth and stability round out the picture. Growth doesn't always mean a promotion. Sometimes it means learning, increased responsibility, or simply a clear sense of where the organization is headed. Stability doesn't mean stagnation. It means people can see a future and believe the company has a plan. And finally, there's work environment, what most people loosely call culture. Culture is not a set of values on the wall. It's how people treat each other under pressure, how mistakes are handled, and whether accountability exists. A healthy environment consistently beats flashy perks. Candidates already know your EVP. One of the most underestimated realities in hiring today is that candidates often understand a company's EVP before the first interview ever takes place. They've talked to former employees. They've noticed how certain roles reopen. They've heard how leadership behaves during busy seasons or tough years. They've seen whether people recommend the company or quietly warn others away. Whether you've intentionally defined your EVP or not, it's already being communicated. Silence doesn't protect you, it just leaves the story to be told by others. So, how to tell if your EVP is helping or hurting you? You don't need a survey or a consultant to spot the signals. However, an objective outside partner, especially one who sees hiring patterns across a lot of organizations, can help identify blind spots, challenge internal narratives, and accelerate improvement. And that's often where real progress begins, and where BR1 helps organizations move faster and with more clarity. When EVP is working, candidates move through the process with confidence. Offers are accepted quickly. Employees refer others without being asked. Turnover happens for understandable life reasons rather than frustration or burnout. People describe the company in similar terms, which signals alignment between expectation and reality. When EVP is broken, recruiting feels heavier than it should. Offers stall. Candidates disappear late in the process. New hires leave early. Every role feels harder to fill than the last. In many cases, what looks like a recruiting problem is actually an EVP problem that just hasn't been named yet. EVP is a leadership issue, not an HR project. Perhaps the most important thing to understand about your employee value proposition is this: it cannot be delegated. HR can support it, recruiting can reflect it, marketing can communicate it, but EVP is created by the decision leaders make every day. It shows up in how meetings are run, how priorities are set, how mistakes are handled, and how people are treated when the pressure is on. No careers page can override those experiences. If the story leadership tells matches the experience employees live, EVP becomes a competitive advantage. If it doesn't, hiring becomes an uphill battle, no matter how strong the market or your brand. So what's this mean going into 2026? Hiring in 2026 isn't harder, it's more honest. Candidates are no longer willing to gamble on environments that feel unclear or misaligned. They're choosing teams where expectations are clear, leadership is present, communication is real, and growth feels possible. The companies that win talent aren't the loudest. They're the most aligned. At BR1, we see this play out every day. The organizations that attract and retain strong people aren't the ones with the flashiest job ads. They're the one whose internal reality matches the story being told. If recruiting feels harder than it should, your EVP may be the real bottleneck. And the good news is this: your employee value proposition isn't something you buy, it's something you build, one leadership decision at a time. If recruiting feels harder than it should, it's worth taking a closer look at your EVP. An objective outside perspective can help separate symptoms from root causes and align what candidates hear with what employees actually experience. When organizations want help pressure testing their EVP and understanding what the market is really telling them, BR1 works with leadership teams to bring clarity and momentum to that process. Until next time, keep building your stronger team.